Joining me on the panel today are Sequoia Blodgett. She flew in here from Atlanta? From Atlanta. Thank you so much, Sequoia, for coming in. Sequoia, can you remind everyone what batch you are?
Hi, everybody. So I came through Draper fall of 2014, so it's been a really long time. But I stayed here for about a year as an entrepreneur in residence. And about, I think 2015, we shot a TV show for called Startup U on ABC Family. So I was on that show as well. So I've been around and seen a lot of batches. I've seen a lot of people have a lot of networking and relationships through Draper. So yeah, fall of 2014.
And Jose, you guys have seen all the Blue Social Smart Cards. So Jose is?
Spring 2019.
Where'd you fly in from?
I flew in from Riverside, California, so about 30 minutes from LA.
Not too far. Jose is right close by. Thank you, Jose, for coming in, and thank you for giving everyone the Blue Social Cards. And Tarun, you guys just heard from. So Tarun, can you remind everyone what batch you are?
I'm fall 2019, I guess.
So we have two from 2019, one from 2014. We'll get to hear about like a variety of experiences. Sequoia, I'm going to start from you. Way more stories there. So fall 2014, you graduate. What were you doing at that time? What was it like? And walk us a little bit through the journey in the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, so I came to Draper after coming out of the entertainment industry. I directed commercials and music videos for a while, and then transitioned from that into tech. And when I came, I was super green. Like I had no idea, like Y Combinator, 500 startups, what's all that, right? So I went through the program, and I ended up creating a prototype, which in the end of the program, I pitched it to him, and he ended up investing in the company. So I went from knowing absolutely nothing to a Delaware C Corp in 7 weeks. So from there, I stayed, built out the company, and then eventually transitioned out of that company, built another company, got an acqui-hire at a venture capital firm, built a business very similar to that company at that venture capital firm, and then eventually transitioned to the investor side of VC. So now I invest in early stage startups, C to Series A, sector agnostic, geo agnostic, whatever makes the outsized returns, and that is where we are today.
That 2 minutes does not sum up the 7 years of grind. So your first company, like you came here clueless, yes, but after the program, like in 7 weeks, now you walk away with a Delaware C Corp. What's this company about, and how were you able to use this network? Because I understand you were able to spend a year here as an entrepreneur in residence. How were you able to utilize your peers from your cohort? How have you stayed in touch with them? And how are you able to utilize the network over the next 2 years or 3 years?
Yeah, so the company was called 7 a.m. So essentially, at the time, there was a lot of dating apps. There still are. There's probably many more now. And my whole thing was there are a lot of people putting people in relationships. So you're swiping left on Tinders, right, whatever. Who's keeping people in these relationships? So my whole thing was I want to create, which now is huge, like a BetterHelp, right? So we were a wellness platform that had relationship coaches on there, which would essentially connect you to kind of guide you throughout your journey. If you had questions, if you know you and your spouse were fighting, whatever, and those coaches would help you. Eventually, when I pitched it to him, he was like, okay, I could definitely see this being like a massive company, right? So after I had built that out, I went and just worked on that for a really, really long time. And by way of Draper University, which was really interesting, is I stayed here as an entrepreneur in residence, which meant I would help other entrepreneurs understand what I went through to actually pitch and get his attention and get him to make that investment. So I coached about 100 entrepreneurs over that year span of time. So I got to know a lot of you guys. I got to know a lot of your businesses, what you were doing, like what was working, what was not working. And through that process, it also helped me iterate on my company because I could see so many different perspectives and what was actually working and what wasn't working. So I spent a significant amount of time building out that company and like building these relationships, right? Which, because I had come from the entertainment industry and making that transition, after I had that company and after that company subsided, when I went on to work in VC, because I had built such a strong network of relationships at Draper University and then Hero City, because I was also pinging back and forth because of the company, I was able to leverage those relationships to stay in VC. So I'd gone to another firm with this other business, which was essentially a platform. It was actually an iteration of what I was doing here. It was a platform that helped entrepreneurs understand how to grow and scale their businesses, right? So another VC firm wanted that, and I ended up building it for them. But the only reason I was able to land there is because I had to come back to Hero City, back to Draper, and be like, hey, y'all gotta vouch for me. Like how was I? What was the experience? Like, did you understand, like, the dynamics of what I contributed? And they were like, yeah, Tim Draper obviously has a massive name in the Valley and beyond, because this firm was in Los Angeles, and they all co-signed. So it's super important while you're here to build cross-lateral relationships with your peers, because you don't necessarily, like, Tim is great, like, he's a great relationship, he's somebody you can ping, you know, when you need to, but honestly, your peers are who's gonna vouch for you, right? And so those are the people who vouched for me to work or build that other platform for M13, which is a venture capital firm in Los Angeles.
I am so glad you brought that up. Like, some people here are from the current cohort, and since day one, that's what I've been talking about. Focus on the relationships with each other, because you're going to be each other's biggest network. Great story there. We're going to come back to that, but Jose, so slightly shorter period, right? Like, Sequoia's managed to maintain these relationships over 6-7 years span, which we'll come back to how you manage that. But 2-3 years out, not a long time. You hit COVID, right? Like right after.
Yeah.
So how has the cohort managed to stay in touch, and how has it helped you in your journey?
Yeah, so my cohort, spring of 2019, it's been pretty cool. We use Slack or I think it's WhatsApp to stay in touch. So there's still about like 40 of us in the chat, and we're constantly sending messages. I do have notifications turned off, but overall though, we're still like conversating, talking. It's great to see like Sadia and J-Lo from my class as well. So, the relationships in Draper University is super exciting, because these are friends, like they said, from around the world. Like, where else can you go to make friends, and then, where they invite you to Brazil or Argentina, or Dubai, right? And I think that's just amazing, because sometimes as humans, we don't get to travel as much and to realize how big the world really is,
So eliminating Airbnb cost, Draper University's #1 offer. But other than that, like in terms of your startup, how do you think the network has helped? Because something Sequoia mentioned, which was really, really great, was she was able to look at or talk to these 100 entrepreneurs and take so much of a different approach or different perspective from their businesses and take it into her business and helped her. So how have you been utilizing the network?
The network? So I would say this past couple of years was pretty tough for us, especially during COVID, as we're a networking application. So you can imagine what we went through, and I guess utilizing the network, I haven't really the past couple of years, besides maintaining relationships and just catching up, making sure my peers are okay, because some of my peers in the class got hit really hard as well and got depressed, and it's always good to reach out and be that person to just talk, even if they're on the other side of the world and you got to stay up till 3 a.m. It's what we need as humans, and that's why I'm also building Blue Social, right, is to facilitate authentic human interactions. So
Love it. One thing Sequoia mentioned was that yes, Tim is there, and you can always email him, but your peers are there to vouch for you, right? So any instance of that happening, or
your peers are what?
there to vouch for you.
Oh, vouch.
Right? Yeah. So versus, okay, let me rephrase this. If you were to rank the alumni network versus the venture network, what would you rate higher? Here's a controversial question.
Well, what's really nice about being part of Draper University is Suba, working with her and getting the blue social cards into all attendees and the people here, or the alumni and the partners at the dinner. So it was pretty exciting, and that's what I really like about this community, because you guys don't just talk about it, you guys actually work and actually use the technologies that the companies here are building. So.
Oh yeah, we're big on using portfolio companies. And shout out to Subha, she put together one of the biggest alumni events we've ever had. The question is that, how have you been able to keep in touch with your cohort after you graduated, and how have you been able to utilize the network within your cohort?
Absolutely. In fact, our cohort was very peculiar. We had a lot of people from MENA region. So around almost like 60% of the people in our cohort, 65% were from the MENA region. And honestly, I didn't know anything about that region. So if not for all those people who kind of guided me, made me understand how does the market work in the MENA region, I mean, what features are more relevant, and so on and so forth. In fact, Eastern European countries, we did market research. And in fact, all of that research was done by our friends in the cohort. So,
Free labor.
Yeah, shout out to Pavel. He actually helped a lot on that side. A few people from Saudi Arabia helped. And relationships. I mean, that's what I'll say. And we are all on the same bus, like-minded people. So the more you kind of build relationships, the more they root for you, because they become your family. So they they're selflessly, sometimes with bias, rooting for you to succeed.
I agree. We've seen that. It's only my second cohort this year. I ran the program last year. Some people are here 2021 and 2022. And we've been seeing that, like, selflessly vouching for each other. But so if I were to take out three biggest takeaways from this conversation: 1, free housing all over the world; 2, free labor, free labor within your cohort; and 3 is relationships. Like, be good to each other, be good humans to each other, because relationships matter. Like, you don't know where down the line they will come into effect, but relationships matter. Tell us more about your fund and putting on, like, walking over from obviously the founder's shoes to an investor's shoes. What are some of the realizations you've had?
There were a lot of realizations that I had, like, in terms of now investing, which is some of the stuff I wish I knew when I was actually raising, in terms of how, we'll go back to relationships, how much relationships absolutely matter. So, for example, I had a question when I was talking to you guys' cohort prior, when we were on the Zoom. They were like, well, I just saw this company, this Web3 company, this crypto company raise 100 million. Why? Well, likely it's because they have the relationships, right? Because none of that stuff has been proven yet. So it's not like we can go look at comps and go, okay, well, we saw that Web3 company did this, or we saw that this crypto company, NFT, whatever, did that, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe they were a prior founder and they had a great liquidity and exit, or they had a company that failed, so at least we know that they're proven. So we've seen that, and we've built this relationship because they raised from us before, so we trust them as a founder. So maybe that's the case. Or if they've gone through a YC, literally the whole premise of that accelerator is to build relationships. Like, when you go in there, they teach you how to position your brand in the market so that you can build relationships with the investors and leverage the investors that they already have relationships with. And that's what people don't really understand. They're like, okay, well, we've built these magnificent companies, but we can't raise money. It's just you haven't got out there and actually started to network and connect with the investors who are out there, right? Last night when we were with, half of the people in there were investors and founders who had done, like, phenomenal things. Like, sitting with the people that you already know, just get out there and, like, start to have those conversations. So I think Tim did an excellent thing by making us connect at those tables and like create those songs, even though it was like, you know, very much in the vein of who he is. It still allowed us to broaden our network and our relationships and connect with people that we wouldn't have talked to, right? And that's imperative. Like, that's actually more important than your business sometimes. You know, you can leverage those relationships to actually get you to the next level. And that's essentially how I was able to start my firm, Railway Ventures, is I was in a program and was a venture partner at another firm, and we had built a relationship. And so once they started investing, I was like, okay, I'll bring in LPs, we'll start making these co-investments, and I built my portfolio off the backs of them. Whereas if I didn't have that relationship, it would have been borderline impossible for me to break into VC that fast as an investor, right? And that happened in like a year. So I would say your relationships are probably more imperative to focus on, or equally as important to focus on as your business.
Let's roll back. How do you start? Because if they use a CRM and reach out to 100 investors, like what's the first step? Like,
do not do that. It's like, okay, I'll go back to like the basis of business when you're making, so you have 3 audiences when you're actually selling, right? You have your cold leads, you have your warm leads, and you have your hot leads. When you're pitching and fundraising, start with your hot leads, then go to your warm, and then go to your cold if you have to. But introductions are imperative. So if you know somebody who's in YC, who's in 500, who's in any of these accelerators, ask them to make an introduction. I personally don't even look at cold leads because it's too many people. So if there's tons of inbound and I'm seeing all these cold leads, it's like I don't even have anybody validating for you. So there's already a risk in that. So when like somebody coming through Draper, I'm gonna have at least some context because I know that you've at least gone through a program that gave you some information to build a business, right? Versus somebody's like, here's my deck, like who are you, right? So I think the way that I kind of contextualize it is if you're a warm lead, go to that person first. And if you have a very strong relationship with an investor, and if you don't, find somebody who does. And people don't leverage LinkedIn enough. Honestly, LinkedIn is one of the most powerful platforms on this planet. Like, go in to see who is connected and like ask them for an introduction, right? And so those are the type of angles I look at in terms of like if it's coming from somebody who's already that I already have a strong relationship with, I'm more keen to listen. And another thing is with VCs, we do a lot of like signaling. So if, say, Tim already made an investment, like I do this a lot. So the company that I invested in recently, Nautilus, Tim had already made the investment, and then the firm that I was with had made an earlier investment. So when we decided to make the investment, I was like, well, Tim, okay, we good. Like, you guys have already did the diligence, so why do I need to do it, you know? So I think it's just, again, those connections and those relationships, looking at who's in your network, who are those warm leads, who can make an introduction, not being afraid to ask those questions, ask somebody to make that introduction for you. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would put in money if I had that signal. So how do you get signal? See, that's the tough part.
Yeah, so the A16Zs of the world, and Andreessen Horowitz, the Sequoia Capitals, all those companies they have massive staffs, right? So they have analysts, they have associates, they have principals, they have people who've done all this work. So if they've already done it, and I see that they've made the investment, because the reality of the situation is Silicon Valley is small. Like when conversations started happening, we know when there's a hot deal, like that flows very quickly, right? And things get oversubscribed very quickly. So I'll see that through, having a conversation. We'll have meetings literally monthly to see like, what deal flow do you have, right? So there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that you guys as entrepreneurs don't know. Like we'll have those meetings. I'll know what deal flow is coming in, because also part of the contextualization of having an investor is they're supposed to help you raise your round. So if somebody comes in and say Tim is your investor, he will make those introductions to other investors that he thinks could be potential value-add investors, right? So it's not all on you as the entrepreneur. Those investors are partners. And I think a lot of people don't look at that. It's like, okay, they're here to give us money. No, they're here to assist you in your process, to help you grow the business, because we have equally as much risk as you do, if not more, because we put in our actual capital. and other people's capital. So I think that's one thing that entrepreneurs need to lean more on is their investors and like having those conversations early. Like say if you are having an issue internally, like go in there and say I'm having an issue because they likely will have a solution versus like not having those conversations. I think that that's one thing that I didn't do when I got my first investment from Tim is when I had issues, I didn't say anything. Like I kept it under wraps and I was like, I'll solve for it, it's fine. No, it wasn't fine, right? So you have to have those conversations and make sure that you're very transparent and look at it as a partnership versus like an investor-entrepreneur relationship.
I think, yeah, that's great advice. To build on that, I think Sequoia is giving the VC perspective here, which is amazing, right? So Jose and Taron, you guys have been fundraising recently. What's your take on it? Like, on having the signal issuing VCs on the cap table is amazing, but the challenge is how do you get there, right?
Right. So I started this company in April of 2016 with my dad and sister. So it's a family tech startup, and it's going on close to 7 years. And initially, there's different. As an entrepreneur, we got to raise rounds, right? And investors and VCs want to see that you have sweat and equity and blood into your startup, right? And so in 2016, I raised a friends and family round, raised only about $140,000, where I invited about 50 friends and family to a local university and pretty much presented. And it was actually my first time seeing the demo of the Bluetooth interactions, so I wasn't even sure it wasn't gonna work. But from that presentation, I was able to raise about $140,000, which helped a little bit. And then, I'm really thankful, also for my parents, because they're definitely heavily involved and very supportive. At one point, we sold 2 of our houses and moved all into one house. So there were 7 of us living in a house. It's pretty packed and it wasn't a big house. So, we had a lot of invested into this and we kind of burned the ships. There's a point, we're at the point of no retreat, because if we don't make this work, it's gonna be very, very tough. And so it wasn't until, for 4 years, I was presenting Blue Social, and it was very challenging because it was a B2C product. So investors hate B2C, well, except him. They were always telling me to go B2B, go enterprise, and that wasn't really my passion and my vision for this company, because I see a lot of similar companies like mine pivot into enterprise and then they get stuck. I wanted to create a social app that can connect everybody, whether you're at the bar, a conference, or at school. This could be a platform for people to use. And so, I presented for 4 years to investors, got tons of no's, presented at TechCo's Angels. I was one of the finalists, but never got a check. And so it was very, very hard. And it wasn't until I met Tim in summer of 2018 at a crypto conference where I was presenting. And, I walked up to Tim, and obviously, it's always good to do research on your investors, right? So I knew that he invested in a similar company called Looped, which was a company that had beacons that you wear around your neck for conferences, and it would network for you. So what we've done is we turned your smartphone into a two-way beacon. So I told Tim that, and he was like, Jose, send me an email, and in the email, write, this is the app to meet people at bars. And he was the first investor that saw it as for everyone versus just professionals. So what did I do? I sent him the email. But little did I know, he didn't really even bother really looking, but he actually had someone from Draper Associates started following me online and was watching my posts. So then I knew that I was on his radar, right? So you gotta watch for these signals, right? And be aware of what investors are looking at you or what it is that they're trying to, figure out. And so after I found out that one of the associates were following me, I found out about Draper University. And, It was exciting because it was my first like true accelerator, and you know, I had like no money, so it was a big investment for me as well to come over here. And you know, a lot of people think like, oh, Draper University's charging this much, and you know, it's all just about relate or like team building and all this. But in reality, it goes back to relationships, right? And so even though I invested, you know, the money to come into this university, it was, you know, amazing because you get to spend time with investors and meet other investors that they bring in during the cohorts and, you know, talk to them. And, you know, it took some time actually, even after Draper University. You know, I didn't win the demo day. I got maybe like top 6 in it. But one thing that stood out to me is when I had Tim sign the book, he hands it back and he's like, Jose, I've never done this before. And I look into the cover and it says, "The next unicorn to Jose," from Tim. And so right then and there was like very huge validation for me, and it sparked so much that after Draper University, I went ham, and we were down to maybe like $10,000 in the bank. We just opened up another $10,000 credit line, which isn't a lot, right? And we just launched also the smart card. So we were the first company in the world to launch a smart business card and go global. And from that $10,000, I was able to turn that into over $100,000 a month in revenue. And that was just, you know, through many things, going through this university, figuring out, pivoting, talking to the other entrepreneurs in this room, learning about NFC or different technologies that could be applied to us. And so even after Draper University, Tim didn't invest. You know, it took like 9 months after DU. So don't expect a check as soon as you go through, right? It's something that you got to work on. And you know, we were, I don't know, like it was quite interesting at the time that we were doing. Like when I first came out with the cards, me and my co-founder actually flew up here to Hero City to try to catch Tim. And on his way out on his Uber, I run over there to him and we quickly hacked together a smart card. And I'm like, "Here, Tim, try this out." He's like, "What is this?" He's like, "It's a smart business card. You can just tap it, right?" And then he did it, and then and then he fell in love. And then there was another guy that was like introducing himself to Tim, and then Tim's like, "Here," and he taps his card. So I was like, "Okay, sweet," like, you know, and that was really great. And then he had us on the Meet the Draper show. If I don't know if you guys are all, you guys are all familiar with it. You know, it's a really great platform that partners with Republic. So I've always looked at crowdfunding, and I was always looking into Start Engine, Kickstarter, but Republic was unique because it's done through a safe agreement. So we went on the show with Meet the Drapers, and in 2020, like February 2020, we started our campaign, our Republic campaign. Keep in mind, this was a month before COVID came. And so, you know, we launched the campaign, and, you know, maybe within 60 days, we had like $60,000 raised, and it was like nothing. And then, so we actually had to extend it because of COVID, right? And we were kind of afraid. But when we extended it, not only did Tim come back and send me an email saying, "How would you like 1 million or 1.1 million?" And of course, I chose the 1.1. And then that was in the middle of the campaign, which then created a lot of buzz amongst the community. And we ended up raising about $1,070,000 from 4,000 investors around the world. And, you know, it was like so exciting because after 4 years of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, it finally felt like we were going to the moon. But then COVID happened. And so, you know, it was very tough. And as entrepreneurs, you know, they say the higher you go, the harder you're gonna fall. And I fell so freaking hard in depression. You know, I tore my Achilles. Blue Social got hacked. We had bank fraud. Oh, everything. You know, I was a border on eviction just, you know, recently. And so it's all about like just persevering and having that resilience because, You never know who or what's gonna change, it, right? And so I'm excited, and it's a journey that as entrepreneurs, you have to learn to make the sacrifices that you have to make in order to become successful. And a lot of people give up when they're 3 feet from gold. If I would have given up in 2019 when we only had $10,000 in the bank, I wouldn't be here where I am today, and I wouldn't have impacted over 70,000 people around the world who now use our application. And so, yeah, that's a little, I'm sorry I rambled on there.
What an inspiring story, Jose. Thank you so much for opening up and sharing this with us. Yeah. So my takeaways, serious takeaways, from Sequoia and both Jose are that, so Signal comes in many shape, sizes, and form, right? Jose picked up on the fact that there are associates following him, and he needs to build a stronger relationships, right? So he took that Signal, he chased after Draper University, and because of that, he was able to develop a stronger relationship. And then 2, perseverance and just this never give up attitude. 9 months after, he's right, so investor updates are important, right? 9 months after, so investor updates are important if you're building your startup. No matter what program you go through that gives you access, you keep, stay in touch with the network, stay in touch with the investors. You might never know who will open that door for you, like it happened for Jose. And warm intros. We'll come back to that, but Tarun.
Well, so I had done this rodeo once before, so I had built a software consulting firm with around 500 people, had exited out of it. And when I came here, I was practically self-funding the entire thing. I had done some market research, had a belief that something is broken in the internet, and I think we can fix it. And but before we kind of started building our internet browser and all our lofty plans of what we need to do, we wanted to validate the market. So what we did was we built a very simple, small security extension. And then we checked that are consumers willing to pay for safety, security, and privacy? And then when we started generating revenue from that, we said, okay, hands down. Then we doubled down on it, and then we came to Draper University. The start was disastrous. We were not prepared. We were kind of struggling. We were with a bunch of strangers who we didn't know early on, but we had this maniacal goal that we need to get funded from here. And so when the presentations happened, we were not in first, second, third, top 10, top 20, top 30. We were nowhere. But then here, this was the interesting part. Our customers were paying us. So what investors give you is investors help you take off, and customers give you growth. And startups are a marathon. It's not a 3-month course. So when the going gets tough get going, and then you stick around, you dig in, and then we kept on showing progress and growth, and we kept on meeting Tim, and almost 1 year after that, he said, we are in. And that's what happened, and now we are raising our Series A. And I don't see recession anywhere, because whosoever we talk to, they look at our numbers and say, oh my God, how did you guys do that? How are you guys jumping 30 month over month by 30%? What's happening? People are purchasing an internet browser for safety, security, privacy? Unheard of. People would not do that. So this is what I learned, but our story is very lame comparatively. I can tell you, I just in the room walked to Tim, and Tim funded us. So we didn't actually pick up the phone, especially the seed round didn't go to a second person to ask for money. It was my money, then it was Tim. And then recently when we started raising Series A, so he came in and said, we're going to lead the round. So go ahead and talk to, and then once that starts, like Sequoia mentioned that, Silicon Valley is very small. then other VCs start to notice. So right now, I'm in a position where I'm getting calls from other VCs who want to talk to us. Bain Capital has called, Headlines has called, some really other big names that I can't disclose right now have called. But it all started with the magician here.
Wow.
Two amazing stories. One was in the top 6, and COVID happened, right? So you can't really predict, and top 6 doesn't mean much. It's a marathon, as Tarun mentioned. And on the other hand, you have Tarun, nowhere near the top 20, top 30, and year after goes on to fundraise, and now is doing a Series A. So again, Draper University is a launchpad, right? It depends on how you use it, how you use the relationships you build here, how you use the network here. And we brought these 3 people to share their amazing, amazing stories throughout the years. So hopefully you guys can have some takeaways on how you can use the alumni network and how you can just build on the relationships you made within your cohorts. Jose, Sequoia, Tarun, thank you so much for joining us on the panel. We have a fun-packed day. We have alumni updates with Tim at 2 p.m. But before that, we're going to do a fun activity, DU style. We do have a small recording from Andy I'm going to play, and then we're going to hop on to an activity. But guys, give it up for Sequoia, Jose, and Tarun. Thank you so much for joining us. One last thing. Oh, selfie. Yeah, let's do it.